Hello and welcome to Inside Business with Wendy Austin. 30 years of business in the community. What actually constitutes a responsible business? The headline, cybersecurity's on course to employ 1,700 people here and generate salaries of over 70 million a year. An industry summit at Queen's hears. Dromore construction company Graham is to build and upgrade 3 railway stations for the London Crossrail project. The contract's worth 46 million. And an in-depth review of business rates is announced as well. And as the Responsible Business in Action campaign draws to a close, we're talking about doing the right thing on Inside Business today. It's not a new concept. In fact, many individuals and businesses have been doing the right thing for a long time. Some call it corporate responsibility, others corporate citizenship or purpose. But what it's all about is how a company manages its business to make profits in a responsible way and to have a positive impact on its stakeholders, the environment and wider society. Business in the community has been at the heart of that project for many companies here and indeed beneficiaries. And we're celebrating that today with 4 of their leading lights. Joe O'Neill's, who's Chief Executive, Belfast Harbour. Kevin Kingston's Chief Executive, Danske Bank. Jenny Piper's Chief Executive, Utility Regulator. And Sam Davidson's Group HR Director with the Henderson Group. Joe, in what ways do you believe that business can be a force for good?
Oh, I think on our own evidence we can be a huge force for good. I think business and society are mutually dependent upon each other for their own individual successes, and unless business reaches out and responds to society's needs and demands, I think it's more to express it as demands nowadays rather than needs, then business itself will simply not be successful, and it won't be able to integrate itself within its local community and its local region and be that force for good.
Jenny, the CSR, I mean, there was a time when it was a bit of a box-ticking exercise, really, wasn't it? I mean, how have issues changed over the years?
Well, I think increasingly the business community has recognised that it can and must be a force for good and for change in all of those areas that Joe has mentioned. And I think with business in the community, with our members representing over 40% of the workforce in Northern Ireland, there's a real opportunity for businesses to help tackle some of those really thorny issues in society. And a lot of what we've been about this week with Responsible Business and with the campaign has been about highlighting how businesses can get involved and that it is mutually beneficial for society, for the economy and for the individual businesses themselves.
I mean, Sam, you have the community coming in through the doors of your spars and shops around the country, so there's a fair bit of face-to-face communication goes on there. But how does doing the right thing affect the bottom line, say, in a business like yours?
Well, it can impact itself in lots of ways. So for a commercial organisation like us, obviously sales are hugely important for us. So if you can encourage your customers and potential customers to come to your stores, feel that they're part of that store, they're part of the experience. A lot of our customers will know the staff that are serving them in the store because they all tend to be local. So that's a starting point really in terms of sales. But then there's things around the values of the organisation that can attract and retain people. So that saves cost in terms of the churn of people, and you keep all that knowledge. And so from sales through to costs, that obviously then translates into the bottom line, into profit. And I think that's where we've done very well, and all of the companies within our network are doing that very thing.
Kevin, Danske Bank, your website says our vision is to be recognised as the most trusted financial partner. Where does responsible business fit into that then?
Well, for us, it's right at the heart of our corporate strategy. So 2015, 2016, we developed our new vision around making more possible. And there are 4 pillars for that, in that for us: customers, colleagues, our partners and society. So I have board level KPIs in terms of our societal role and societal contribution, which we measure, which we challenge ourselves against it. And I can assure you I'm just as animated about our core accreditation as I am about our quarterly financial results.
Oh, goodness. KPI?
We measure how we're seen in society, and in particular then the core independent external accreditation is a huge part of our plans. We have silver accreditation under core at the moment. We're back in this year hoping to achieve a gold accreditation. I think we're the first company to ever reapply for accreditation within the accreditation period. We're that keen.
So you're really seriously keen, Jenny.
I think that issue that you mentioned that Kevin talked about in terms of trust is a critical one, and it's one that I see a lot with the regulated companies in the electricity, gas and the water sector, where they can see a real benefit of engaging with the community, of volunteering, of mentoring, particularly with some of the deprived communities. They can see that helps them, helps build trust. And given that those sort of sectors, whether it's building new electricity network or gas network, they want to make sure that they are seen as engaging, not just doing things to the community, not just doing things to people, but actually being part of the economy and the society that they're engaging with. Because after all of us use electricity and water every day. We might all use gas, but we don't always get a good press for those utilities. And I think being active members of business in the community is an opportunity to build that confidence and trust that Kevin mentioned.
Joe, I wonder to what extent this has all become come even more to the fore, given that in this sort of digital world that we live in now, to put a kind of jaundiced slant on it for just a moment, businesses can't get away with things anymore. You know, every phone is a camera. Everything is so much more transparent, and it's very easy for an individual or even a small organisation to launch a global campaign that costs them buttons actually, and can do a company really major damage. So is it something that really has made people think, well, right, we've actually got to do this properly? Yeah,
you're quite right. Businesses just cannot get away with it any longer. And I think businesses have responded to that in two ways. You're quite right there in saying this has been ongoing for quite some time, going back as far as 30 years with business in the community. I think the change in more recent times is saying, how do we aggregate all of that together, recognise what we're doing at an aggregate level, what the contribution is that we're making, what the change is that we're making, and how do we measure that today, and most importantly, how do we then evidence progress within that? At the same time, when you look at social media and the ability for overnight campaigns to literally emerge without any necessarily large funding base behind them, does make our organisations very much aware that even as the minor transgressions can be put under spotlight, can appear in significant headlines with significant people momentum behind them within a 24-hour period. And organisations need to be on message, on alert on a 24-hour basis to be able to respond to that. And listen, that's a positive force for good if society can engender a culture of that always on, as I describe it, and engender a culture where companies recognise that they need to respond immediately. Being able to sit back and hope that the press media storm will blow over in 24 hours and it'll all go away and we'll go back to normal business, that's gone. And there's so many evidence of campaigns within this last 2 months, 3 months, this last week, where clearly you just cannot sit back and allow that to happen.
Sam?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the advent of social media has totally changed the landscape in terms of just generally trust that people have, the ability for people to say things that they wouldn't say to your face. They wouldn't write a letter, but they can feel comfortable giving feedback on social media. In terms of our organisation, we've been part of that, and it is a challenge. It does keep you right. It keeps you on your toes. It's actually in the times when we've gone through something like that, it's actually amazing to see how many people take to platforms to actually say things that they think are good about our organisation as well. So it's actually fantastic customer feedback. But I think that can only be a good thing in terms of getting feedback from the people that count more easily and getting it authentically as well.
I suppose one of the interesting things about this particular programme today is that it's not too often that we would have four people in the studio here who are at the top board level like the four of you are. So that must be an indication that companies are really taking this seriously and that they think it's important to be involved in an organisation like Business in the Community, but then also maybe pass that down the line isn't maybe the right way to put it, but pass it down to smaller companies who might still have a question in their heads, Kevin.
Absolutely. It has to be led from the top. It has to be led by the board, but it also needs to be a movement right throughout the entire organisation. But then, small businesses want and need to get involved as well. One of the things we've done is supported BITC with a small business network, whereby small businesses can get involved, learn from maybe some of their larger peers about what's going on, about the role that they can play, And every size of business, regardless from the smallest to the largest, has an opportunity to be involved in this type of work, and has the obligation to be involved. As we've said so many times, businesses as a force for good, regardless of size.
And there must be a two-way street in all of this. Sometimes you learn from some stellar idea that some small organisation has, or maybe take something back to your company from business in the community, or the other way around.
Absolutely, we're constantly learning. We're constantly being inspired. That's part of what Responsible Business in Action, this campaign over this 2-week period, is all about. An opportunity for all of us to hear about what's going on in other organisations, challenge ourselves, benchmark ourselves, and get inspired and get involved. And that's a fantastic movement.
I mean, it's been about telling the stories of what people are up to. I wonder what some of those are, Jenny.
Well, I think within the utility regulator, because we are setting ourselves up to tell other organisations in many ways what to do and how to do it, we feel it's really important that we lead by example. So things within my public sector organisation that we can do are somewhat limited. So we can't sponsor things the way perhaps Kevin can or Sam, but we can get involved in volunteering activities, whether it's cleaning beaches, helping at the donkey sanctuary is really popular for understandable reasons, but also encouraging healthy behaviour within the workforce in the utility regulator, promoting awareness of good mental health, and that's good for our workforce, but it's encouraging people to think beyond not just their day job, but also how they can contribute outside of work in their own time and what opportunities there are. We have found that to be really very, very beneficial. And initiatives like Time to Read or Time to Count, Time to Code with business in the community give people time to leave their day job for a while, go out into some of our schools, work with young people, give them not just the benefit of a Time to Read session, but also the chance to talk to people who are in work and maybe people who have actually come from the same community as them. And for some of our more vulnerable people and deprived communities, that can be incredibly powerful.
Tell us a wee bit about those different schemes, Time to Read, Time to Count, Time to Code and so on.
Well, essentially that's something that's facilitated by business in the community, partnering with organisations like the four of us represented here today, where we allow our employees some time off to go and work with the schools and perhaps help a teacher, support a teacher by reading to a story to some of their young classes, or to help them. I mean, I would have a lot of people who would be very numerate. You would hope that the regulator would.
That's a relief.
But going and helping them with little exercises in terms of time to count, but also letting them see how maths can actually be relevant in the world of work, but not necessarily because you go on to be a maths teacher. I can't talk about the coding because that's not something my organisation does, but increasingly it's making those sorts of skills real and talking to real people in employment as opposed to the teacher. The kids tend to love it. The feedback that we get is always great, and the schools love it as well because it's building a connection with the businesses as well in their local area.
Joe, what sort of projects is the harbour involved in? I suppose we tend to think of, you're a place where trucks roll in and out and, there's not that much kind of face-to-face connection, if you like.
So, in any one time, we've probably 50 different partnerships going with local community groups, environmental groups, a wide diversity of stakeholders. Yes, we may be viewed as a place where trucks go in and trucks go out of at a very simplistic level, but the scale and diversity of activities that exist in the harbour estate means that we do touch so many different areas of the business world, societal issues, community issues, etc. To pick a couple, plastics is a very topical issue at this moment in time. UN report out earlier this week with some fairly dramatic headlines regarding what could happen to the global world within 2050 if we don't address the plastics issue. Plastics in the ocean is obviously a core part of that, and clearly we're in a fantastic position to be able to respond to that and address that. We're already doing that through installation of sea bins to capture some of the plastic waste that it does accumulate in Belfast Lough. we're now working with partners to devise a Belfast Loch-wide initiative to recover plastic, which is the first stepping point. But I think it's important as well to say it's not just a reaction of responding to, say, recovering plastic. It's also sponsoring organisations to then look and see how can we change behaviour so that the plastic doesn't appear in the loch in the very first instance. If we look internally, one of the things that we're most proud of, and I think pride is one of the big things that comes to the fore when you talk about business in the community. It does engender huge pride in all of the organisations for what they're doing and what they want to do, right from board level, and Kevin talks right down to the employees on the ground. Internally, diversity is a major challenge for us, because in the maritime sector, it's a sector historically with a male-dominated workforce. We've made huge strides and progress in that area in this last 3 or 4 years. We've increased the female workforce by 25% in recent years. We've got some positions which historically were entirely male, vessel and traffic controlling staff. Half of our staff now are female. A number of those came from administrative backgrounds, and through supporting their personal development programmes and ambitions, we have been able to help them train to become vessel traffic operators. We have similar initiatives underway with our port engineering staff, again a male-dominated workforce, but we've shown through support and personal development programmes that we can help other staff move into areas traditionally associated with being male-dominated.
It's very interesting what the different fields that all of you are involved in, and I suppose the way that you do come together as well to share experiences. I mean, Sam, you have all of these stores around Northern Ireland. The people in them all have different things that they're interested in, perhaps different charities or whatever that they might want to support, or there are different problems in the community around. How do you balance the local bit with the bit that you're trying to kind of oversee from the top?
It's a good question, because we don't directly run even a third of all the stores that you see. So 2/3 of those, about 300 stores, are not under our control. But we have a great community there. We always start with local. So if a local retailer has a cause that's important to them, the team thinks is important, that takes precedent. But there's a good biting point there. So, for example, we've been working with Cancer Fund for Children as our chosen charity since 2011. We actually just broke through the £1 million fund raised there in the last few months, and that's something that all of our retailers have signed up to, and it gives a commonality to the brand, but everybody's got a story at whatever part of Northern Ireland they live in that relates to something that the Cancer Fund for Children do. So there's a balance about, you know, what means something to the team that you're asking to go and raise funds for. But ultimately, we would leave it very much down to the retailer, the business owner, to do what they think will work best.
It's very interesting, I must say. You're listening to Inside Business. By the way, I'm Wendy Austin. We're looking at 30 years of business in the community, making companies here more responsible in the way they do business. Doesn't sound like it's too much of a chore to do that. And my guests in the studio today are Jenny Piper, who's Chief Executive of the Utility Regulator, Joe O'Neill's Head of Belfast Harbour, Sam Davidson's Group HR Director of the Henderson Group, and Kevin Kingston is Chief Executive of Danske Bank. Kevin, whenever you say you've been to a business in the community board meeting, and as you say, you've been really kind of inspired by something, then you take it back into the bank, and then you're the boss, so you can make it work, really. I mean, I suppose that's the advantage of the buy-in at a really senior level, isn't it?
It's certainly a huge part of it, Wendy. But you know, we have a fantastic team. We operate a responsible business board, which I have the privilege of chairing. And that board then is in charge of overseeing, supporting and encouraging all of the responsible business activities right across the bank. We've got some great networks who take particular themes. So we've got our Rainbow Network, we've got a Disability Action Group, and we've got external commitments and charters that we sign up to make sure we challenge ourselves in terms of delivery. And it's so important that what we do is a movement right across the entire organisation. It's not just one or two people that are passionate about a particular topic, that are activists in a particular area. It's about everybody having the opportunity to get involved. And it is such a broad agenda. There is something there which each individual can be passionate about, which means something to them. And harnessing that is so powerful if you're able to do it.
To go back to the point that I made to Jenny earlier on about taking the bad look off things, when the banks have had a bit of a duffing up over the last few years for all kinds of pretty good reasons, let's face it. So Is this also on the agenda to improve your own image, to make people realise that you're not all bad?
No, you have to start from a fundamental belief that you have an obligation to give something back to the communities we serve. If people think that that's cynical or whatever, that's up to them. We're about being a force for good within the responsible business agenda. So there are fantastic areas where we believe we can actually build a legacy over time. So things like mental health in young people in particular. We've got a fantastic partnership with Action Mental Health, and we support them with a programme called Healthy Me that will reach about 3,000 school children this year. Those sort of things where we believe over time we can really make a difference for Northern Ireland society. That's what's important. If people want to join with us, if want to support us in that, then they're very welcome to, and that would be lovely.
For those smaller companies that maybe are dipping their toe into the water, I mean, some of them will have been doing the right thing for years and doing it as a sort of knee-jerk reaction. They maybe haven't thought that what they're involved with has anything to do with social responsibility or whatever. But if they are keen to get involved, can you kind of assure them that it's not necessarily going to be difficult, that it's not necessarily going to cost them money, and that it actually might be of great benefit to them?
There's so much support there. If people want to get involved, start with business in the community. But I can assure you that everyone around the table here and larger businesses that are perhaps further along on that journey would be only too happy to help as well in terms of advice and support. There's a huge amount of material there, but BITC is a fantastic place to start.
That whole business about mental and I suppose physical well-being as well, it's all tied up together, isn't it? But it's such an important issue at the moment, particularly the whole kind of mindfulness, wellness and so on. Are you, Sam, involved in that kind of field as well with the companies that you both work, or the shops that you both work with provide goods to, and the ones that you run as well?
Very much so. Gone are the days of the bad back. In terms of why people are off work. So within our own referral statistics for our own occupational health function, stress and anxiety are the top two reasons why people are absent from work by a long way. So that's not different, I imagine, to most other organisations. So it's good that there's an awareness of it now. It's good that people are able to talk about it, but we have to find solutions for it as well. And some of that starts with us as leaders. Because the world is moving faster. You have to get more done in a shorter space of time. I know we probably all go home in inverted commas, but we're still working in our minds. So that starts with us in terms of giving our teams permission to be able to talk about how they're feeling and then provide support mechanisms for them. So, a lot of organisations, at the Business Community Board will have things like employee assistance programmes, counselling services, employee feedback. We're just about to introduce a team of mental health first aiders who will be colleagues, who will be volunteers, who will be there as a first protocol with their team members, that if any of them aren't feeling great or actually the first aider notices somebody's a little bit different, that there's a safe place for people to be able to talk about how they're feeling and then onwardly refer them to someone with more expertise. So I think that is the big challenge for most businesses for the coming years.
Yeah. And I think that's absolutely right, and really important that we recognise these issues within our own workforces. One of the things that the utility regulator has been doing through our consumer protection programme is starting to help educate and support some of our utility companies, particularly those that do have a direct door-to-door interface with customers, to help educate them that they may not recognise a vulnerable customer at the door. It may not be an elderly person, perhaps on a walking frame. It could be a younger person really struggling to cope with managing their money, managing other health issues, but it may not be visible to suppliers. And we want to make sure that we're there helping support them and encouraging them to actually think beyond the obvious, what is a vulnerable consumer. It's part of them reaching the sort of regulatory standards that we want, but it's also pushing them to be more responsible and responsive as businesses. And again, moving away from seeing business as something that does things to people, but is part of working in the community, working in the society. You can be a profitable, thriving, successful business and still be involved and be part of the community and give something back. And I think probably all of the businesses here have been demonstrating that in spades. It is part of being Northern Ireland PLC, and we don't talk about Northern Ireland PLC nearly as much as we used to in the past, but it is back to that sense of pride in what we are here collectively and what business and society can do together.
And just even in terms of how any size of business can be involved in dealing with some of those vulnerable customer challenges, you know, the opportunity for partnerships with other organisations that are out there is such a key part of that solution. You know, we're involved with a social enterprise called the Now Group, who produce a jam card, just a minute card. I think a lot of us are involved with that. About 13,000 jam cards across Northern Ireland. A really discreet, great way for a person to just ask for a little bit more time at a branch counter, or perhaps when, you know, dealing with electricity or at a spa or whatever it may be. But those sort of partnerships are such a great opportunity as well, regardless of the size of business, to be involved in making a contribution to the vulnerable members of our society.
Do the bigger companies like yours, or like all of the ones we have around the table here today, Joe, do you kind of help out the smaller companies who want to get involved? Is there a sort of exchange of expertise on the way through, perhaps?
Yeah, we hold a lot of workshops and a lot of support meetings where our so-called ambassadors will reach out and share experience and guide people along as to what's the best path for them, point in the direction of other agencies which can help them, other companies. Not necessarily we can help on every occasion, but we will certainly almost know someone else through the BITC network who's maybe better positioned to support them in that particular initiative or particular cause. And that's a very important part of a responsible business, that the larger organisations like us all here collectively are supporting smaller organisations, helping them grow their business, but also help them grow as to their contributions to society and support for society.
I wonder too about the whole business of the new ways of working, the new young people who are coming into organisations, also that whole thing of having, in some cases, 5 generations in the same workforce. Is it almost kind of essential that you are involved in this sort of thing now to attract and retain people in your organisations?
Completely right. I think we've all seen very good examples of that in recent times. I think new employees, prospective employees, are looking to companies. Back to Sam talked about some of the old recruitment times, where it was maybe quite rudimentary as to what they looked for. Now they do. Prospective employees now do look at your responsibility agenda. What are you doing? Are you aligning with some of their own self-beliefs and their own wishes for action in this particular area, or cause for action in this area? So you have to be able to respond and address that. They will also look for CEOs to be the leading lights in a lot of this, and that the CEO is actually taking a personal interest in it and driving that agenda, that it's not just another corporate glossy that's sitting on some shelf somewhere that's been relatively easy to push out but not necessarily have the support. They'll want to see the CEO right at the front of that document, and then see clear evidence and maybe ask for evidence in advance of even joining the organisation, that what has been promised in those brochures and those messages or on their websites is actually been lived within the organisation. So a huge tool as part of ongoing recruitment.
Sam, can organisations survive into the 21st century successfully without actually playing this kind of responsible role in their communities?
Not for long, I don't think. You know, it's one of those, it depends what you call responsible business. You know, long-standing businesses have been doing this anyway, whether they've consciously set out to do it or not. It's just part of who they are, part of their values, whether it was philanthropic or altruistic or commercially driven. So, you know, I do think Joe's right. You know, people look at organisations now with a good, healthy pinch of salt. They can investigate them. You can go on to sites like Glassdoor, where you can see what other employees think or ex-employees think about that. So that's the challenge. They are customers as well. So we have to attract them. So I think it's something that at their peril organisations would ignore. I don't think people would survive for long without having some level of responsibility apparent at the leadership level.
Fascinating. Thanks all of you very much indeed for joining us for Inside Business this week. My thanks to Sam Davidson, Kevin Kingston, Joe O'Neill and Jenny Piper. It was produced by Niall Blaney. I'm Wendy Austin. You can stay in touch on Twitter at Wendy Talks Biz with 2 Zs. Next week we'll be launching a soft fade onto the first fairway at Royal Portrush, looking at what hosting the Open will mean for the immediate area and the whole Northern Ireland economy. Inside Business, Sundays at 1:30, Mondays at 6:30 and a podcast when it suits you.